Good morning. This is Joe Forward, legal writer for the State Bar of Wisconsin. And today, joining us are the three current presidents of the Wisconsin Association of African American Lawyers. And today I wanted to talk about the events that have been ongoing since the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the many protests that have been ongoing since then. And the presidents are here to talk to us about that. We have current WAAL president Makda Fessahaye. She's the current president, and she's also a administrator at the Wisconsin Department of Corrections. Makda, how you doing?
Good, thank you.
We also have William Sulton. He is the president-elect of WAAL and a trial lawyer at Gingras, Thompson, and Wachs in Milwaukee. William, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
And we also have Kristen Hardy, who is the immediate past president of WAAL, and she's legal counsel at Briggs & Stratton in Milwaukee. Kristen, how you doing today?
I'm okay, Joe. How are you?
Doing okay. Thanks so much for joining us. Makda, I just want to start with you and have you explain the WAAL organization and the mission and what you guys do as an organization.
Yeah, sure. So WAAL is an association of African American lawyers. It is the oldest minority bar association in Wisconsin, founded formally in 1988, but prior to that also had a long history of membership of African American lawyers in Wisconsin. As an organization, we are here to serve the African American legal community as well as the Black community as a whole. We host continuing legal education events. We are involved in pro bono services such as our expungement clinic that we co-sponsor with a number of other organizations. We host our annual Valendale Scholarship Dinner, where we award four law students from Marquette University Law School and University of Madison Law School, 4 scholarships in honor of Val Phillips, Dale Phillips, Judge Maxine White, and Judge Charles Clavert. We also host a number of other events to ensure that the legal community is working together and has a community that they can rely on, especially in times like this.
Great, thanks, Makda. So today we want to talk about the protests following the tragic death of George Floyd. Obviously, this is a very sad time, a trying time for people of color and Black communities. And it really requires us, I think, to have difficult conversations about what we're going to do moving forward, especially in the legal community. So, Makda, I'll just start with you again. We're seeing massive protests nationwide. Do you think this is a pivotal moment of change in the United States? I mean, what do you think it would take for change to become a reality?
I think this is a pivotal moment, but this is not something that has occurred overnight. This is just the boiling point or the bubbling over of all of the things that have been occurring in the United States for a number of years. And so I think that we're starting to see organizations, companies that probably had never reacted previously to a death of a individual due to police brutality react, and really acknowledging that this is unjust, and that the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery were unjust and due to a long history in the United States of racial injustice, oppression, and racism. in terms of what do I think for the change to become a reality, it can't just be words. We have to follow up on all of the statements that people are making. We cannot just rely on a statement in support of the Black community and support of the protesters. We have to follow up with action. And I think we're starting to see that the protesters are putting a lot of pressure on public servants, politicians, different organizations around the US to finally put their words into actions. And I'm hopeful that that will actually be the case.
Kristen, can you follow up on that question too?
Sure. First, let me say that I speak for myself, not on behalf of my company. But with that said, I definitely think there is a tectonic shift taking place. But to Makda's point, we can't look at this in a vacuum. And we also need to be really clear that this isn't new. This isn't the first time in my short lifetime that I've seen something like this. And some of us are a little bit closer to it. And I truly believe with a lot of us being quarantined or locked down because of the COVID-19 pandemic, it has added to this bubbling up into something a lot bigger. I also think the dichotomy between, let's say, protesters for wanting to get haircuts or, go to graduations versus someone has lost their life due to police brutality, due to racism. I think that dichotomy is so obvious for people in a way that we've never been able to see before. And I think that's why we're getting some of the reactions from companies, from brands, because they feel like they have to respond. But again, I agree with Makda that it cannot be statements. And that's one of the things I love about WAAL. We always say this internally, but we do the work. It doesn't take a moment like this for us to look at how all of these things interplay. If we get really deep, you talk about a history of discrimination, whether it's, laws or regulations that have aided in keeping Black people or people of color in general oppressed in a way. If you look at all of that and then how that interplays with the legal profession, I think this is a time, and just professionalism in general, just corporations. I think we're seeing a time where people have to react and they're realizing, okay, I can make a statement, but I have to look internally at my company, or I have to look internally at my organization and see, are we aiding in any of this? Are we not promoting our Black talent? Are we not hiring Black talent? What's going on within our companies? So I feel like these sound like a bunch of disjointed things, but I really want to be clear that this is not in a vacuum, and that the dichotomy with COVID-19 and then the police brutality is kind of changing. We can see it really clearly, the difference. And then finally, everything's related. All of this relates, what we do in the legal profession, what's happening at corporations, and then what we're seeing outside with the protests. It's all related.
William, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Let me first say that it is a real joy to see the sustained political protests that we've had over the past several weeks. It is really good to see that. I certainly believe this is a pivotal moment for us. But what we really need is follow through on legislation. And specifically, we need to eliminate qualified immunity for police officers. It's important that people understand the history of policing and discrimination in our country. It's important that people understand that most police-citizen interactions that result in arrest are violent, and that violence has been visited upon African Americans in a way that is not true for white citizens. It's important that people understand that every major city in this country has a George Floyd. Whether it's Dontre Hamilton in Milwaukee, whether it's George Floyd in Minneapolis, Eric Gardner in New York. We have made movies in this country about various people who have been killed by officers, handcuffed, face down, shot in the back. And I think that's what you're seeing in this country, is it being captured on tape, and people really being able to embrace that because they've seen it in their own community over and over and over again. But we need to get legislation that takes away qualified immunity. We also need to punish police departments through defunding them, not abolishing them, but defunding them and putting those resources into other community avenues that do a better job of handling things like responding to mental health crises. We need to put some of this money into better training and retraining. You're not training if you're not retraining, particularly on the legal standards that are applicable to stops, frisks, and arrests and uses of force. What we are seeing happening to protesters is truly outrageous. We have folks who are being shot in the face with rubber bullets and tear gas canisters. It appears that in Milwaukee and Madison and throughout this country, police officers believe that their role is to constrain and box protesters in rather than to facilitate and guarantee their First Amendment right. And I think that we need court decisions and lawyers to step up like you saw happen in Denver, Colorado. And we need that type of injunction change legislation to make sure that our rights are guaranteed and not infringed.
Right. And so you mentioned, that actions speak louder than words. And so when we talk about, so right now we're talking to an audience of lawyers, and obviously the legal community in Wisconsin is majority white. And so, when we talk about what the legal community can do, what are we talking about? I mean, what can the legal community do right now to move these things along, both short term and long term? And William, I'll start with you.
Sure. The fight for civil and constitutional rights and equality for African Americans is not limited to African American lawyers. I grew up in a family. My mother was a lawyer. There were many lawyers. There were Hispanic, Asian, white lawyers who did a lot of great work for equality and civil and constitutional rights. So it isn't the case that only Black lawyers can do this. But the legal community actually has to step up and start to represent people, to give truth to their oath, to provide these critical needs. And right now, what we need are lawyers who are willing to help deal with the protesters, many of whom are largely African American young men who are being cited and charged with simply exercising their right. Contact their local city attorneys, their local county district attorneys to stop these practices. I think lawyers also have a role to play in advising legislatures on what is happening in the court system, particularly around qualified immunity and particularly around Monell claims. Lawyers have a great role to play. One of the things I can tell you is I was in the Eastern District of Wisconsin in Judge Stadmuller's court, where he asked the lawyers at a scheduling conference, no less, to contact senators so that they could help get funding and an additional judge in the Eastern District of Wisconsin. That was a reasonable request from Judge Stadmuller. And it's a recognition that lawyers must play a bigger role than simply appearing in court. And right now, the community needs lawyers, perhaps to step a little bit outside of their normal practice area to help these folks who are being abused right now by government officials.
Makda, you want to respond to that question?
Yes, I think it's important to know that throughout American history, lawyers have been a part of every civil rights change that has occurred, be it the civil rights movement or the suffrage movement or even the movement to have marriage equality for LGBTQ communities. And so this is not foreign to the legal community to be a part of these movements And in fact, it is our work that really pushes and moves the needle along. Some of the other things that lawyers can do, in addition to what William stated, is even if you don't work in the area in which, even if you don't practice, say, civil rights law, or say even appear before judges and have the ability to lobby to the legislature, you can still offer your services in a different way. There's legal observer trainings that are very helpful for protesters. So individuals can go to protest and simply observe as attorneys to make sure that people's constitutional rights are not being violated. And so that is actually something that WAAL is going to be co-sponsoring along with the ACLU to provide legal observer training to our membership and to others that are interested, so that even if you don't practice in this area, you still have an opportunity to assist, because again, it is lawyers that help move the needle forward, along with many others, but I don't want to diminish the role that we have. The other thing that I would charge, DA's offices to do is look at the history of their prosecutorial charges. Look at whether or not there has been discrepancy or injustice or disparate treatment in how and who they are prosecuting, and then going further, being able to lobby our legislature to look at sentences and whether or not certain sentences should truly be the way in which they are written. The other thing that people can do, you can obviously donate. You can donate your time by either being willing to serve as a pro bono attorney for protesters. You can donate money to the various organizations that are doing work in this field. And then Kristen mentioned this earlier, but there's a level of self-evaluation that needs to be done. Not only as a person, as a human, but also what is your organization doing? What is your firm doing? What is your company doing in response? And it can't just be, again, a statement. You have to look at, what does your leadership look like? Are you truly emulating this diversity and inclusion statement that you might have? How are your Black and brown people at work, employees, feeling? How are they feeling supported? Are they being able to promote within? And then also there needs to be a demonstration of grace, empathy, and then again, follow through.
Kristen, do you want anything?
Yeah, I largely agree with William and Makda, but I think there are multiple ways to attack. This is not a problem that we're going to end in a week or 2 weeks, or in 10 years or in 30 years. If we see that balance happen before I leave the earth, I would be shocked. So this is work that we have to do every single day. And I am a person that believes the small actions matter. Sometimes we get so caught up with the idea of needing to do some large lifting and make some great change that we forget about the small actions we can do. Joe, you mentioned earlier when you asked the question, the lawyers in Wisconsin are largely white. The lawyers in America are largely white. African Americans represent a very, very, very small percentage. I think it's under 10% of attorneys in this country. So I think for the legal community, something really easy we can all do is take a look at ourselves, really self-evaluate and be honest about why this profession remains one of the least diverse professions that of all the professions that we have. Why is that? What is the reason for that? And then from there, I guess, work backwards and try to figure out what are those small things we can constantly be doing on a regular basis, whether it's unconscious bias training, or whether it's not being passively racist with the "I can't find Black talent" that we often hear, especially people say that to WAAL all the time. We want to hire more Black lawyers, but we can't find them. And I can point you to 30 of them coming fresh out of law school from Marquette and University of Wisconsin. So looking at really being able to self-evaluate, that's a really simple thing to do. And then again, exercising some grace as people are learning and understanding. Exercising some empathy for people with different backgrounds than you, and just really listening, learning. Like I said, these are really easy, small steps that people in the legal profession can take.
Right.
Can I just add one thing is you also have to hold people accountable. That's really important, and that really demonstrates whether or not you truly understand or truly empathize with people of different backgrounds. Because if people find or people see that you are consistently ignoring or brushing things under the rug, or just simply not holding people accountable for bad behavior, that really says a lot about the organization in which you're a part of. And then that also speaks to whether or not Black attorneys or Black employees are willing to stay there for a long time. Because if you're not willing to hold someone accountable, why should I stay? Because you care more about that person than maybe the action or the behavior and how it made other people feel. And so that's something that's really important, especially in retention of Black talent, and moving organizations forward.
Right. Well, and so you touched on this last question that I had, and maybe there's something more to add, William, for you. You know, how can others on a personal level, and not just attorneys, but everyone on a personal level, how can others outside the Black community be good allies, even if they're not in a position to advocate for individual people or clients? And William, did you want to start off on that one?
Sure. And what I'll say is that we're seeing some of that now. We are seeing folks show up to these protests. You're seeing folks hanging signs, making T-shirts, and having conversations. And what I would suggest to folks is they need to do more. They need to lobby their local legislatures and local officials. They need to show up and really explain that they get it and that this is a big problem and it's going to take all of us to solve it. I think people need to donate money, as Makda mentioned. It doesn't have to be that you're representing somebody in court, but you have to represent basic principles of human dignity and justice. And that requires a commitment, personal capital, and it requires a commitment of showing up. And I'm really happy to see that from folks. I've gotten messages from folks that I would just call white folks, not necessarily white allies, but putting together funding for people who need bail to be released because they got arrested at a protest. We're seeing organizations pop up overnight. We're seeing people joining organizations. We're seeing people joining as not only legal observers, but protesters and reporters. And all of that, I think, is critical to solving this issue. But we have to keep and maintain the pressure on local and state officials to get and solve these problems. And so I would encourage folks, whether they're an African American or not, to continue to show up, to continue to send out emails, to continue to donate, to reach out to organizations like WAAL and others to see how they can help, and whether it's making phone calls or sending letters. And I would also encourage law firms across the state to consider closing their office for an afternoon so that their employees can participate. And I would encourage all law firms to do that.
Makda, did you want to add to that, Makda?
Yeah, William touched on this, and I want to add to it. treat people with respect, do the work, listen, learn. But the one thing I really want to emphasize is that Google is free, and you cannot rely on your Black friend for all of the answers. We are tired, we're exhausted. This is trauma for a lot of people to see this day in and day out, and to see it over the years. So please research and read and listen and learn, but also know that we do not have the answers for the oppression that has been put on us. The other thing is, you have to talk to each other. White people need to hold each other accountable. You need to talk to your family and friends that have these racist ideas, whether or not they know it, because we cannot do that work for you. And that's how we have to, we all have to hold each other accountable and talk to each other so that we can make this world that much more better.
Kristen, do you have something to add to that?
Yes, this is something I think I'd like to see from the legal profession. I think this has already been implemented in some of the states in the country, but I would love for the Supreme Court to consider adding unconscious bias or anti-racism training to our CLE ethics requirements. Again, small action. I'm all about taking the small actions, and I think that's something simple. But people who take those trainings, they have to go in with an open mind, and they have to go in, they can't be defensive, and they have to have some level of understanding or desire to understand in order for us to make strides. So that's something the legal profession, I think, particularly in Wisconsin, could do. I would love to see that. On a personal level, I mean, I kind of harken back to what I said earlier. It's really important for us to learn, to listen, to understand. Find someone you can talk to, who you can ask the questions, that you may be afraid to ask in public. And then also do your research, read their podcasts. Google is free, to Makda's point. We say that all the time. It's free. It's the best resource you could ever use. Definitely take the chance to get to know some people. And again, don't try to do it all this week. Don't try to do it all today. Go back to what I said earlier. WAAL does the work all the time. That's what we're doing. It's not a one-time donation. It's not a one-time CLE. It's not a one-time scholarship. We're working on the pipeline every single year, at the middle school level with mentoring, all the way up to the law school level with making sure we're or at least trying to balance the scale for economic inequality for some of our students. Whether it's putting together CLEs or putting together events. We have an event with Balsa in about 30 minutes to talk about some of the changes, how to be a great summer associate in light of COVID-19. The judicial, I'm a member of the Judicial Selection Advisory Committee with Governor Evers. I was appointed by Governor Evers in that role. WAAL in tandem has a mentorship, judicial mentorship program led by Alex Lodge. And with that, we're trying to mentor as many people who may not be ready for judgeship today, but eventually may be thinking about running for judge or looking at an appointment. So again, these are a lot of small things we can do, and doing the work every single day and being consistent every single day. It can't just be what we're doing right now. We have to make sure this is in the back of our minds when this is long over, where it's a new topic du jour. We have to still be thinking about what can we do to dismantle these systems. And that's my best advice for everyone, whether you're in the legal community or not. Work to dismantle the system every single day.
Well, I want to be sensitive of time here, but is there anything that we didn't cover that you guys wanted to mention? Any one of you?
I would just like to mention that we recently saw a particularly despicable conduct by a lawyer in the Milwaukee area, and I think the state bar needs to do more than what it's done to address that issue and highlight it. And the other thing I'll say is that the lawyers who show up in court on a regular basis know and have seen discrimination and they need to talk about it more. And it's a topic that just is not brought up enough, and it needs to be. And I think that the state bar should try and develop a system to track racial disparities in the court system and throughout the legal community, and publish those results on a regular basis so that we can start to address them.
Makda, William, Kristen, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. It's important to have these discussions, and I hope they continue. Thanks again so much for being with us.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.